Throughout the 12th and 13th centuries, Northern European powers launched campaigns against the last pagan remnants of Europe. Over the course of a century, the Crusaders spread Christianity to the Baltic tribes and the Finnish tribes. Finally, all but one part of Europe remained, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which fiercely maintained its pagan beliefs well into the 14th century. Let's get straight into it. Following the Great Prussian Uprising, the Teutonic Order further expanded and consolidated its control over the old Prussian tribes, and by 1283, the Prussians were well and truly subjugated. During this subjugation process, some Yodvingians, an old Prussian tribe, fled into Lithuania to avoid the wrath of the Teutonic Order. The Lithuanian Crusade would begin in the winter of 1283. The Teutonic Order's main goal was to capture the region of Samogitia, as its location served as a wedge that separated the Order's Prussian holdings from the Livonian Order, an autonomous branch of the Teutonic Order. The Order's first target was Vicene, a Lithuanian wooden hill fort along the Niemen River, which they captured and burned during the winter of 1283. In 1298, Lithuanian Grand Duke Vytenis attacked Courland. He was initially defeated twice by the Crusaders before allying with the rebelling citizens of Riga and scoring a victory at the Battle of Tureda. Hostilities would die down until 1303, when the Grand Duke would send 2,000 knights to guard their borders. In addition, in 1311, he launched an invasion into Masuria, a relatively underdefended area of the Prussian border. The Teutonic Order responded to this by sending military units into Semigalia, consolidating their control, and organizing around 20 raids into Samogitia. To defend their eastern border against the Lithuanians, the Teutonic Order erected numerous small fortresses and fortified houses, many constructed in strategically important locations, such as Niemen, Sovetsk, and Majovka. Grand Duke Vytenis would make one last grand attack before dying in 1315. Gediminas' reign saw the conflict with the Teutonic Order intensify. For starters, in 1325, through a series of marriages, he allied himself with the King of Poland, who, from 1327 to 1332, attacked the Teutonic Order in order to restore control over Pomerania. This conflict would be a failure for the Poles, as not only did they fail to restore control over the region, but they also lost Dobrzyń. To make matters worse, in the winter of 1329, King John of Bohemia joined the crusade on the side of the Teutonic Order and mustered an army to participate. This army would arrive in Samogotia in 1336 and capture the Lithuanian castle of Pilonai. The Teutonic Order would replace it with a new fortification named Byronberg. However, after withdrawing most of the army from the fortress, Gediminas led the Lithuanians to besiege and capture it. In 1341, Gediminas died, and fighting between the Teutonic Order and Lithuanians temporarily subsided. In 1345, the brothers Algirdas and Kęstutis ousted their brother Jaunatis and seized the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, establishing a diarchy and splitting the Grand Duchy between them. Algirdas controlled the land to the southeast, and Kęstutis controlled the land to the west, including Samogotia, so they picked up a lot of the slack of waging war. In 1348, the Teutonic Order defeated the Lithuanians at the Battle of Strava, weakening their power. The Order took advantage of this by raiding Siauliai and destroying the castle at Deluona. To avoid any further conflicts with the Teutonic Order, Kęstutis began negotiations with Pope Clement VI to Christianize the Grand Duchy in 1349. However, this would ultimately fail, as in October of that year, the Polish King Casimir III, who was the intermediary in these negotiations, invaded Volhynia, ruining Kęstutis' plan for Christianization. In 1358, Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV advocated for a peace between the Teutonic Order and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania on the condition that the duchy would convert to Christianity. Unfortunately, however, peace negotiations died down as Algirdas' demand for the Teutonic Order to withdraw from Lithuania was rejected by the Holy Roman Emperor. Fighting would only die down in 1261 when the Teutonic Order captured and detained Kęstutis. Unfortunately for the Order, Kęstutis would escape the next year and fighting would resume it. And in April 1362, the Teutonic Order would destroy Kaunas Castle. For the next 8 years, the Order attacked Lithuania 20 more times, forcing the dual Grand Dukes to raise a massive army and confront the Order. They did so at the Battle of Rudo, and were defeated by the much more Teutonic force, marking the last serious threat by the Lithuanians. They would occasionally raid the Teutonic Order, but, for the time being, they wouldn't raise a proper army against the Order. Algirdas' death in 1377 began a power struggle in Lithuania, as his son Jogaila, his brother Kęstutis, and Kęstutis' son Vytautas all vied for power. In 1380, the Teutonic Order secretly signed a treaty with Jogaila, which promised him their support against Kęstutis. The following year, the Order assaulted the lands of Kęstutis and, playing off both sides, informed Kęstutis of the secret treaty. Kęstutis convened with the son, and, in August of 1381, they decided to attack Jogaila, beginning the Lithuanian Civil War of 1381 to 1384. In 1382, Jogaila tricked and captured Kęstutis and Vytautas. Kęstutis would die in captivity, and Vytautas would escape and flee to the Teutonic Order, where he would ally with them and be baptized in 1383. However, the next year, Vytautas would reconcile with his brother, ending the Lithuanian Civil War. Alongside that, he broke off his alliance with the Teutonic Order and burned down 2 of their castles. In the end, the Lithuanian Civil War of 1381 to 1384 would see Jogaila assume control of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. In order to combat the Teutonic Order, Jogaila decided to form a personal union with the Kingdom of Poland, which he did in 1385 after marrying Queen Jadwiga of Poland. In addition, he also adopted Catholicism, and finally, in 1387, Lithuania, the final pagan state, converted to Christianity. You would think that this would mark the end of the Lithuanian Crusade, but if you did, you would be wrong. From this point onwards, the Lithuanian Crusade would have evolved from a religious conflict to a political one. Lithuania would once again enter a civil war in 1389, as Jogaila's cousin Vytautas wanted control over the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, as its current ruler was very unpopular with the people. He tried to capture Vilnius, but was repelled, so he allied himself with the Teutonic Order. The next year, they once again failed to capture Vilnius. Over the next 2 years, no side would be able to score a decisive victory, so, as a compromise, Jogaila appointed Vytautas as the Grand Duke of Lithuania, while designating himself as the Supreme Duke, thereby maintaining control over his territories, while replacing the Grand Duke with someone more popular. 6 years later, the Teutonic Order would score a massive victory with the signing of the Treaty of Salamis, in which Vytautas relinquished his control over Samogitia. In 1399, the states of Eastern Europe would briefly ally to repel the Golden Horde, only to be defeated at the Battle of the Vorskla River. This was instrumental because from that point onwards, the Lithuanians would cease expanding eastward and would instead refocus their attention west to the Teutonic Order, a change in strategy that would soon be important for history. So at this point, everyone was on edge. The Polish and Lithuanians were displeased with the Teutonic Order due to their expansions and conflicts over the past 2 centuries, and the order itself faced resistance from its Samogitian subjects. They first revolted in 1401, but were crushed in 1404, with Jogaila himself recognizing the Teutonic control over the region. However, in 1409, the Samogitians once again revolted, this time with help from the Lithuanians. This conflict escalated when the Teutonic Order threatened to invade Lithuania, after which Poland declared their support for the Lithuanians, beginning the Polish-Lithuanian Teutonic War. Initially, the Teutonic Order did well. However, on July 15, 1410, the Polish, Lithuanians, and Teutonic Order all met up at the famous Battle of Grunwald. This was a decisive defeat for the Order, marking the beginning of the Order's decline. In 1411, the Teutonic Order signed the Peace of Thorn, which relinquished their control over Samogitia and ended the Polish-Lithuanian Teutonic War. Finally, the Lithuanian Crusade ended in 1422 with the signing of the Treaty of Melno, in which the Teutonic Order forever dropped its claim on Samogitia. So, in conclusion, the Lithuanian Crusade was an important conflict that changed Eastern Europe's politics and culture. This period was key to Lithuania's eventual conversion to Christianity and its closer connections with Western Europe, marking a significant moment in European history. From this point, paganism was no longer a major religion in Europe. Honestly, after making videos only about European history, I'm ready to shift theaters. So if you want to see me talk about history on another continent, leave a comment. Otherwise, have a good day.